Morning grade 12s. The second part of your project will be on financial indicators, and according to the scope you received, you are supposed to prepare all financial indicators with emphasis on these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sections. That's what we're going to do now. The first section is operating profit on sales. What does it mean? It means the profit or for every 100 Rand of sales, how much is left after all your operating expenses are paid. The operating profit on sales, it means the core operations before interest and tax focus on trading and operating activities only. So what does it mean? You want to know, did you control your expenses well? So you take your operating profit, that is before your tax and before your interest, you divide it by your turnover, it's another word for sales, multiply by 100 on 1. So for every 100 Rand of sales, how much do you have left after you've paid all your expenses? You want this to be as high as possible because you want to have as much as possible left of your sales as your profit. So to improve this ratio, you have to control your expenses better. A decrease, it means there's a poor cost control or pricing issues. There's poor control over your operating expenses. If you compare it with the previous year and there's an increase, it means there's good control over your expenses. The next one is your gross profit. Now your gross profit, that's your markup percentage that you add to everything or all your stock that you buy. So if you buy something and your markup percentage is 50%, then you add 50% to that cost price and then you get your selling price. So if your gross profit percentage or your gross profit on cost of sales, that's supposed to be the same as the markup percentage that you've decided on upfront or before your sales. Though there's reasons why there's a difference between your markup percentage and the actual percentage when after your sales and after you set up your financial statements, then you take your gross profit, you divide it by your cost of sales, you multiply by 100. If there's a difference between that percentage and the original markup percentage that you've decided up on front, these are the reasons. Mostly it's because of trade discounts. Maybe it's the end of the season and you had a clearance sale, end of winter, you sold your winter clothes at the sale price, or you have that red dots of Edgar's. There might be an error. Originally, when you calculate the markup percentage or you calculate your sales, you made an error. And remember that theft or missing stock, it's applicable when it is periodic system, not in your normal perpetual system that we used since grade 9. The next section, it's dividends and the interpretation of dividends paid out. Our net income after tax, the directors decide on how they are going to distribute or how they are going to divide the net income after tax. Remember the tax, they don't have a choice. They have to give the tax to the SARS. Then what's left, directors, they choose which percentage are they going to pay out to the shareholders in the form of dividends, and which percentage are they going to keep back for the company for future expansions in the form of retained income. So the first formula or the first indicator, we are going to look at earnings per share. So in total, how much did the business earn per share after they've paid the tax? That's the second column. Always remember this is expressed in cents per share. We want it as high as possible. Now that earnings per share, we divide it to dividends, and that we as directors, they decide on this. A part they give to the shareholders in the form of dividends, and we call that dividends per share. So take our total dividends divided by the number of shares, and then it's also calculated in cents. So that is the cash return paid to shareholders per share. It's the actual cash that the shareholders will receive per year in the form of dividends. They also want it as high as possible because it makes the shares attractive. People want to buy shares because they also want high dividends, a high return on their investments. We compare this with the previous year and the earnings per share. Remember, we get dividends, interim dividends in the middle of the year, and then there's final dividends at the end of the year. So your dividends, you can have 3 dividends per share calculations. The one is the dividends per share of interim dividends. Then you have the dividends per share of the final dividends. You can also take the total dividends divided by the number of shares if there was no change in the shares. But if we have bought shares, buyback shares, or we had issued new shares, then we had a change in shares. Therefore, we will have dividends per share in the interim dividends, dividends per share final dividends, and then we will add the two to get the total dividends per share for the year. If there was no change, we will only take the total dividends and we will divide it by the number of shares. Now, what's important for the shareholders, they want to know what's the percentage of the available profit that's paid out to them. And what's the percentage of the available profit that the company kept back. So that we call dividend payout rate. And remember, a rate is a percentage. Therefore, we will multiply by 100. There's 2 calculations on your formula sheet how to work out dividend payout rate. The first one, you take the dividends per share that we calculated in the middle column, divided by the earnings per share that we calculated in the left column. Then we multiply by 100. In that way, we can calculate the percentage of earnings paid out as dividends. Now, this shows the policy between dividends paid out and the retained income that's kept by the company. Okay, so why do directors decide to keep some of the net profit back for retained income? Mostly it is because they want to expand the business, or maybe they want to buy a new building, or they want to build a new building, or they want something to improve. They want to improve the company. So remember, that dividend is not paid out to the shareholders now. It's kept back for future expansion. But in future, the shareholders will benefit from the dividends that's kept back. But many people, or many shareholders, they want short-term return. So they want as much as possible dividends to be paid out. Okay, now there's another option. You will see there in the calculation formula column. If you don't have dividends per share or earnings per share or your numbers of shares, this is not a formula that we found often in the past. So maybe you can find it now in 2026. They take the total dividends for the year divided by the net income after tax, multiply by 100, and that will also give you the dividend payout rate. Okay, so if this rate is high, there's less retained income. If it is low, the directors decided that they want to reinvest money, or they want to keep it back for future growth. Sometimes this rate can be more than 100%, which means that the directors decided to pay out some of the retained income of the past, they're also going to pay that out as dividends for this year. Okay, so why will this rate be all of a sudden very high? They want to, the higher they keep the dividend payout rate, the more they want to keep the shareholders satisfied. If the dividend payout rate is high, they might attract more shareholders to the company and more people would like to buy shares in the business. Let's go to the next section, return on total capital employed. What does this mean? It measures the efficiency of total capital used. Remember, capital used in a company, it can either be capital provided by the owners in the form of shares, or it is money that they borrowed from a financial institution. So this formula, it's net profit before tax plus interest divided by capital employed. And remember, capital employed now, it's your owner's equity or shareholders' equity plus your long-term loan or your non-current liabilities. How do you think about this financial indicator? Does the return beat the interest rate on a long-term loan? The return on capital employed should be higher than the interest paid out on the loan. So when you have to comment on the return on total capital employed, remember, you borrowed money at a certain rate, let's say at 10% interest, so you have to pay back 10% interest. So if you run your business and your return on total capital employed, it's less than 10%, where will you get? Let's say your return on capital employed, it's 8%. So now you are short of 2%. You earn less than you're supposed to pay on the loan. If your interest rate on the loan is 10% and your return on total capital employed is 15%, then you did a good job. You manage your business good. You use the loan in a good way, so you have effective use of your available funds. You earn 15%, you have to pay 10%. So after you've paid your interest, you still have profit left for the business. Okay, so we say if your interest rate is more than what your return on your total capital employed. Remember now your interest rate is 10%, for instance, and your return on total capital employed, it's 8%. So you're not moving forward with your business, you are moving backwards with your business. Therefore, we say it is negative gearing. An easy way to remember this is when you are in reverse with your car, you move backwards. So now if your return on your total capital employed, it's less than your interest rate, you are moving backwards. So you have a negative gearing. But if you earn 15% and your interest rate was 10%, then you are moving forward. You made good use of the loan. So that loan, it put your business in a better position than it was before the loan. Let us read what they say here on compare and comment. You compare your interest rate and you compare with your previous year. This return should be higher than the interest rate on long-term loans. Okay, then there's the question, should the business sell more shares or borrow money for expansion? If the interest rate on loan is higher than the return on total capital employed, the company should sell more shares. In other words, your interest rate is, for instance, 10% and your return is only 8%. Then it will not help you to have a new loan. It will put you in a negative gear. Therefore, you should rather sell more shares. You can borrow more funds if the return on total capital employed is more than the interest rate on loans. In other words, you use the bank's money to make money in your business. So you borrow money from the bank. I'm going to use the example of 10%, and your return on that 10% that you used, it was 15%. So in that case, the money of the bank, it put you in a better position, therefore it is positive gearing, so it was good for you to borrow more money from the bank. Okay, you can look at the recommendation. You borrow more if the gearing is positive. In other words, your interest rate is less than your return. You reduce your loans if it's negative. If your interest rate is more than your return, then you must rather reduce your loans. Okay, there we have all our calculations. When we hear of a loan, then we look at, in the green, you will see your return on total capital employed, which we call gearing. You compare that with your interest rate. You can also compare it with your previous year. If your interest rate on your loan is more than your return on total capital, then we said we are in a negative gearing. We are moving backwards. The business did not utilize the loan well. The business is not in a better position with the loan. But if the interest rate on the loan is less than your return on total capital employed, then it's positive gearing. The business makes good use of the loan. The business is in a better position due to the loan. Okay, there's a trick here in the square block. You take your return on your total capital employed minus your interest rate. If the answer is negative, it is negative gearing. If you take your return on total capital employed minus the interest rate, if the answer is positive, we call that positive gearing. So the loan put you in a better position. Then the next ratio that you need to know to decide on your loans, if you need to take out a loan or not, is your debt equity ratio. Now, here we talk about your risk. Now, debt, that's your long-term or your non-current liabilities in relation to your shareholders' equity. And remember, in a company, equity is shareholders' capital plus retained income. So what do we do with this? We compare it to the previous year and we compare it to other companies. If this ratio is 0.6 to 1 or less, you are a low financial risk, so you can borrow more money. The bank will borrow you more money. So we call that low gearing, low risk. You are driving slow in a low gear on the road. You have no risk of making an accident. So if it's more than 0.6, let's say 0.8, 0.9 to 1, it starts to get higher. If it's more than 1 to 1, it's high financial risk and the bank will not borrow you more money. If it's more than 1 to 1, you are driving fast on the road, you are in a high gear, you are in 6th gear in your bakkie, and you are in a high risk of making an accident. Okay, so that is not actually financial language, it's just an easy way for you to remember it. If debt equity is high, it's 0.8, it becomes a bit high, a bit risky. 0.9, a bit risky. More than 1 to 1 is very risky, so they will not borrow you more money. But if it's less, let's say 0.6, 0.5 to 1, they will borrow you more money because you are a low risk for them to lose their money. If your business fails, they will lose all their money. But if you are a low risk, there's a low chance for your business to fail. Then we go to liquidity. I see working capital is spelled wrong. That P is supposed to be an O, working capital. Can the business pay its current liabilities? Remember, debt equity, we worked with long-term liabilities, non-current liabilities. Now here we work with our current liabilities. Can the business pay its current liabilities from current assets that can be converted to cash? So if we talk about the liquidity ratio, we talk about your current assets in your statement of financial position and your current liabilities. So will you be able in short term, liquidity is on short term, to pay your current liabilities without selling your buildings or your fixed assets? I don't know if you can remember in COVID. In COVID, this was a problem. Businesses, they have a lot of buildings, vehicles, cars, tractors, land, but they struggled to pay the current liabilities because they couldn't sell their stock. So the first two ratios, it's current ratio versus asset test ratio. Current ratio, it's current assets versus current liabilities. Now we have your total current assets, which comprises of cash, debtors, and stock, versus your creditors, or your total current liabilities, creditors, overdraft, short-term loans. Now, interpretation, if it's too low, you have liquidity problems. In other words, you will struggle to pay your short-term liabilities. If it's too high, like 3 to 1, you can have excess stock or cash or debtors. If you have too much stock, what's the problem with too much stock? The risk of obsolete stock. Your inventory may become outdated. Your stock may go out of fashion. New technology may replace your existing products. Or if you have too much cash, your interest rate on your cash is low, then you must rather put some of your cash in a fixed deposit where you can earn more interest. What's the problem with debtors that's too high? They might not pay you back. No? Then you have your asset test ratio or your quick ratio. I saw in some places they talk about the quick ratio. In this case, you don't take your inventory into calculation. In other words, maybe there's a reason why you can't sell your stock. Like in COVID, we couldn't sell our stock, or your stock is outdated, or your stock is not in fashion anymore. Will you then still be able to pay your current liabilities? There's two ways to calculate your asset test ratio. It's your current assets minus inventory in relation to your current liabilities, or your trade and other receivables plus your cash equivalents in ratio to your current liabilities. What can you do to improve if there's a big difference between your current ratio and your asset test ratio? You must know you have too much stock. Let's say your asset test ratio is 1,2 to 1 and your current ratio is 3,4 to 1. It's a big difference. It means you have too much stock. So in that case, you must do something like have a sale to reduce your stock. The next section of the liquidity ratios is your average debtors collection versus your average creditors payment period. And you must know how to calculate these. All your financial indicators, you must know how to calculate them. I'm just going to explain this in short because we did that in grade 11 as well. We want our debtors to pay us before we have to pay our creditors. Ideally, we want our debtors to pay us within 30 days. And if we can arrange with our creditors, we would like to take at least 60 to 90 days. If they don't want to give us more than 60 days, you have to pay within 60 days. Otherwise, you're going to pay interest or you're going to pay penalties. But the ideal is that your debtors collection period, it must be shorter than your average creditors payment. So you want your debtors to pay you first, and then you want to use that money to pay your creditors. Then you will not have a cash flow problem because you don't have to use your other cash to pay your creditors or your own cash. You can first receive money from your debtors and then you can pay your creditors. Then the last section of the liquidity ratio, we have 6 liquidity ratios. Now these two, they are the last ones. The stock turnover rate, what does it mean? This is calculated to determine the number of times stock is replaced per year. How fast stock is sold, how often stock is replaced. So how many times per year do you buy new stock? I think you must know your formula by now. Then on the other hand, we have stock holding period. What does it mean? How much number of days stock is held before being sold? So now this depends on your nature of your business. If you sell bread, you would like your stock holding period not to be more than at least 2 days. Every 2 days you want new bread in your business, né? Versus clothes, that maybe you want to sell your clothes 4 times per year, because for every season you want new clothes in your business. So when you break down or compare these two, you must take the nature of your business into consideration. Now let's look at the formula for stock holding period. So it's average stock divided by cost of sales. Now average stock, it's your opening stock plus your closing stock divided by 2. Now nowadays they ask you at the end of the financial year, for how many days do you have stock left? So if we say for how many days do we have stock left, we don't take your average stock, we take our closing stock. And then we multiply by the number of days that we've sold the stock in the previous year. So if we sold this stock for 2 or 3 years now, so that in the last financial year, we sold it for 365 days, then we multiply by 365 days. But let's say the financial year ends at the end of February and we only started to sell the stock on the 1st of December of the previous year. So in the last financial year, we only sold the stock for December, January, February. It's 3 months. So then we cannot multiply by 365. Then we will multiply by 90, because the information we had, it's only applicable to 90 days. Okay, I hope you will do good in your 2026 second term project. Enjoy your day.